And what's going on, Brodes?
I'm a broken man, TK.
You're a broken man. What are you talking? The Phillies just clinched a bye? We should be in a good mood tonight.
That's right.
What's the matter?
That's right. You're right. When it comes to Phillies baseball, I'm riding a high. When it comes to the Eagles, they have destroyed me, and it's only week 3. And they're 2-1. It's a sad world I live in.
They're 2-1, man. You're broken now?
Yeah, because it is an extension of 2023. So it's not really just about these 3 weeks. It's the full body of work of Nick Sirianni since the collapse.
I will say, these games have felt very 2023-ish. That game on Sunday, I don't even know how to describe that game on Sunday. It was one of the weirdest games I've ever seen, and we were just talking about it before the show. You can look at that result, and you can say, in one sense, how the Eagles win that game. You can look at it another way and say they should have won that game by 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to stupid play calling without kicking points and turnovers. If you clean up those areas, you're right. You probably win by, 2 touchdowns? I heard a stat from Rube, and I don't remember it exactly, but it was something along the lines of they haven't won by double digits since Miami of last season, which was about week 7 or so?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's absurd.
That was really, it's crazy. You can mark that game as like the height of Philadelphia sports, because the Eagles played Miami on a Sunday night. The next day was game 6 of the NLCS. And ever since that point, things obviously fell apart for the Phillies and would fall apart for the Eagles a little later on. But if you want to get in and start the show here, 215-592-9494 is how you join the show. As we mentioned off the top, Phils clinch a bye with a win and a Brewers loss. So all to be decided now is, do they get the 1 seed? Dodgers and Padres playing right now will keep you abreast of what's going on out there in L.A. So if you want to get on the Phils, you're welcome to. But we will start with the Eagles. And as we mentioned real quick, Brodes, here we sit through 3 games, Eagles 2-1. Weird start. Some very odd games. And you can look at it either way. Just like you can look at that game Sunday either way, you can look at all 3 of these games either way. You can say, hey, this team should be 3-0. If Saquon Barkley catches the pass, they are 3-0. You could also say, hey, this team could be 0-3 right now. So the fact they're 2-1, not all that bad. But coming into the season, let's face it, it was all about 2 guys. It was about Nick. It was about Jalen Hurts. And this is the question that we wanted to throw out there to start the show here. Do you feel better or worse about Nick Sirianni? And do you feel better or worse about Jalen Hurts? And if you want to get in 215-592-9494, where would you fall on that, Brodes? Do you feel better or worse about Sirianni? And do you feel better or worse about Hurts?
I feel worse about both of them. And now, I'm not surprised that Nick Sirianni looks this foolish again, but I thought that maybe changing the coordinators and handing the keys to Kellen Moore would put Sirianni in a role that would benefit the squad. And as we're learning throughout this past week, he's making certain decisions and big 4th down calls, and we'll get more into what that truly means and how it's all designed from the top, Howie and Laurie. But just from an overall sense, I feel worse about Sirianni because his decision-making on 4th down, it's not a questionable 50-50 call that sometimes we could debate. Hey, Doug should have went for it. Nah, he probably shouldn't have. But you can understand the logic. It's just flat-out bad coaching. Just incompetent coaching, not understanding time, not understanding awareness, not understanding the flow of the game. It is so putrid. So for him stepping in and all, I thought I'd feel better about Nick just based off the fact that he wouldn't be involved as much as he is throughout the first 3 weeks. So that's where it is on the Sirianni front. And I feel worse about Jalen because I'm not surprised his great throws are showing up, whether it's the first week to Saquon or a throw to AJ or Devontae on a 4th quarter drive. I knew Jalen had that in his bag. What I'm stunned about and why I feel worse about Jalen is these turnovers are unacceptable. So weirdly enough, I feel worse about both as they sit at 2-1.
Yeah, I hear you, man. If you want to get in 215-592-9494, better or worse about Sirianni, better or worse about Hurts. And this is where I am, and I'm with you. And I don't mean to be negative. The team's 2-1. But if this season's about those 2 guys, and I think we all knew coming in, the microscope is on Nick, and it's on Jalen more than anybody else. It's hard not to feel worse about both of them. And I'll just start with Nick, because he's not supposed to have control of the offense. That's supposed to be Kellen Moore's job. We'll examine whether that's actually true or not throughout the course of the show. But his job is motivating players and game management. If that's the case, he's failing. I mean, the culture seems okay. There's some undisciplined behavior on the sideline, stuff like that. But other than that, whatever. I mean, the culture at this point, 3 games in, seems fine. But the game management has been a disaster. And I think, the reaction following the Falcons game, in my mind, was blown out of proportion. I didn't think his decision-making in that game was that bad. I know people were upset about the 3rd and 3 thing. I catch the football. Like, if Saquon Barkley catches the football, you win the game, so I didn't have a big problem with that.
I agree.
But New Orleans, man, I mean, it was terrible. And it doesn't matter what I think. Doesn't matter what you think, really. All that matters is, did it work? Like, did these decisions work, whether it's the Atlanta game and the New Orleans game? And the bottom line is, none of the decisions have worked.
None.
Like, the going for the 4th downs, it feels like all of these are blowing up in his face. That's been terrible. And as far as Hurts goes, and you brought it up, and I think, kind of hit it right on the head there, is as far as Jalen Hurts, he's done some good things. Like, there have been flashes throughout these games. I thought specifically in the Atlanta game, him running the football, him showing that burst, that's been impressive in shades of the guy who we saw take this team to a Super Bowl in 2022. But the biggest thing for him coming into this year was cleaning up the turnovers. He's got, 5 in 3 games. He's got now, listen to this, Brodes, 26 turnovers in his last 21 games. That is way too much. And for a quarterback who we're looking at making that step and ascending into being a franchise guy and a guy you win because of, you cannot win with your quarterback turning the football over the way he's turning the football over.
I agree. And I almost look at all these weapons that they have, and it's not a bad thing to have so many powerful names, if you will. But I have to imagine that plays a role, because if you're the quarterback, you think, I need to get AJ the ball. I need to get Devontae the ball. I need to get these guys the ball, which will probably force you to maybe throw certain passes that you trust your guy to maybe go get it, or even if it's double covered, it's Devontae or it's AJ, he could be a big body and create separation, whatever it is. And it's definitely screwing him up right now. And on top of him, just, I don't know, missing Dallas Goedert. We don't talk about that because he threw it to Devontae Smith and it still helped move the football. But he missed Dallas Goedert for a wide open touchdown. And sometimes these games are going to be so close that it comes down to one play or not, and that's a home run hit. You can't miss those home run hits. I watched the Washington football team or the Commanders play, and you're throwing Jaden, just throwing bombs downfield right on the money in the end zone.
Yeah, that kid's going to be a problem.
Stud. Flat out stud. But you got to make those throws, and he's missing them and throwing underneath instead at times. So you got to find that balance. But if Jalen Hurts doesn't clean it up, you're not going to be able to win the games that we need to, where the difference is 1 or 2 plays.
Yeah, and I know what a lot of, I guess, Jalen Hurts defenders will say, and I am not a Jalen Hurts hater. I like Jalen Hurts. I still think he can be the quarterback of this franchise for years to come, but he's got to clean up the turnovers, and we can stop dissecting on every play, was it really his fault or was it somebody else's fault? Because that's one thing I've seen on, like, the Devontae Smith interception.
No, that's a Jalen Hurts problem.
Right. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. You can't turn the ball over. Like, it really isn't that, challenging of a thing to figure out. You can't do it. It's why Donovan McNabb, who takes a lot of heat in this city, it's why he was such a good quarterback for so long, as Donovan didn't turn the football over. I mean, he may have been inaccurate at times, may not have been the best in big spots, but he didn't turn the football over. And, hey, I'm not saying this team is done. I'm not saying they can't turn it around and can't figure it out. But, if this year is about those two guys first and foremost, even though they're 2-1, and hey, most of us probably expected them to be 2-1 at this point. I think the majority of us thought that they'd lose the Green Bay game, that they'd beat Atlanta, and New Orleans was kind of a toss-up. I mean, they ended up being better than expected, but hey, that's a tough place to play. You never know how that's going to turn out when you go down to the Superdome. But if we're looking at this thing and we're judging Nick and Jalen, I'd really like to get somebody's take who feels better about either of those guys, because coming into this year, they're the 2 biggest questions, and it's hard to say you feel better about them after 3 games. I feel worse.
I definitely feel worse. And to your point, though, real quick, of the interceptions with Jalen, I'm looking at these safeties, too. These safeties are doing something. Bates had some. You saw Honey Badger reading it. So as much as maybe you would like Devontae Smith to do something a little bit better with his route and play tougher or whatnot, these safeties are making plays on Jalen, and whether they're baiting him, whether they know something, whatever, they're reading Jalen Hurts and stepping in there to grab those interceptions. But yeah, I got to go back real quick to the Nick Sirianni front. And it just comes down to the way the team is set up right now. It's very jumbled. unraveled again. It feels like a mess. Maybe Nick Sirianni doesn't know exactly what CEO means. Maybe Lori and Howie Roseman didn't do a good enough job explaining what exactly the details are for him on a day-to-day basis, or even on game day, what he has to do. But I relate it to, if you're in high school, put yourself back in your high school days and you got your high school girlfriend, right?
You're asking me to go back a long time here,
I'm just saying.
Not as long as you.
Just put yourself back in those shoes.
I mean longer than you. That's my age.
Yeah,
not being able to articulate my thoughts properly. You shut up, Francisco. I see you ready to chime in.
I said nothing.
There.
I don't know. I'm just observing.
Right. I saw him ready to pounce as well. But when you're, 15 years old and you just have this hunch that maybe your girlfriend's cheating on you, and it finds out she is, that gut feel, whatever that nasty, disgusting feeling is of something doesn't feel right. And then 3 months later, you found out there was a reason why you felt that way. That's how I feel about the Eagles.
Sound like a man speaking from experience.
No, I never did.
So,
I married my high school sweetheart. I never had to deal with that situation. But I know a lot of people can relate to that. And with this Eagles team, I'm sitting here knowing that there's something uncomfortable in my stomach telling me it's not right again, and I can't shake it.
So, and this is kind of where I was going with it, but bigger concern at this point, if we're both on the same page, obviously, that Nick and Jalen, we feel worse about both of them than we did before the year. You would, I'm guessing, say Nick's the bigger concern, right?
I would say Nick is the biggest concern for me, just because the head coach, even if he's not on the field making the throws or having the mistakes or whatever, if a lineman jumps off sides, there's nothing that you can do if you're the coach about that. The stink or the stench or that nastiness I'm talking about, his presence defines it because of the collapse last year. He is the face of the dysfunctional Eagles right now. So his presence, just the energy that is surrounding Nick, starts the whole thing.
I'll give you this. It does feel like there's a tension that is difficult. It's difficult to separate last year from this year with this team. And I don't know why that is, in a way that I don't know if I've ever felt it before, where you're watching this team play, and it's like you're not looking at it like it's a different season, almost. You're looking at it like you can't just put last year behind you and move forward. It feels like after every game, that question's kind of out there, like, does this feel like the 2023 Eagles? What's reminding you of 2023 Eagles? And I don't know why that is. You think that's basically because of Nick?
I have to imagine it's Nick, because a lot of the other stuff has changed. You have Vic Fangio in here now. You have Kellen Moore in here now. And we are, this whole week, trying to figure out exactly when Nick calls plays, when Nick isn't calling plays. And last year was about, was it Brian Johnson's offense? Was it Nick's offense? Was Sean Desai doing things? Is Matt Patricia doing things? All of the uncertainty about who and what is going on, no matter if it's a new coordinator or not, the same denominator here, the common denominator is Nick Sirianni.
And this is the thing, I get it, but I also think Nick's a little bit of an easy target here. And I think the organization has, in a way, made it this way. But for me, man, Hurts is the bigger concern. Like, this guy's the starting quarterback. He's got to get this stuff cleaned up. Like, you cannot win without your quarterback protecting the football. And I think it's something where, and I know the quarterback position in this town, especially, is polarizing. And, I think we always kind of stake out our spots where if we like the guy, we're going to defend him at all costs. So for years with Wentz, where Carson Wentz, 2018, 2019, and I was in that camp where I didn't want to see. Like, I didn't want to see the things that were kind of manifesting in front of our face that were going to turn out to ultimately be his downfall in 2020. But with Jalen, I'm kind of tired of him saying the right things. I'm glad he's saying the right things, but at some point, man, you got to clean it up. I mean, 26 turnovers in 21 games, to me, that's by far the bigger concern. And I think it's easy to look at Nick and say, well, Nick came back and the culture's still there, and look at these these decisions he's making. That is the problem. But in the end, for me, Jalen's got to protect the ball, and it doesn't matter what Nick does. If Jalen doesn't protect the ball, this team's not going to win.
long-term, big picture, Super Bowl, I agree. You can't have these many turnovers. But I also feel, and credit to Howie Roseman here, that there is so much talent that even without Nick Sirianni, they can still put together wins and still have a decent record and all. So I feel if you actually had this same exact staff, and I mean coordinators, and you're talking about these wide receivers and all that, and you flip-flop the Nick Sirianni stuff with someone that actually commands the room the right way and has a presence and everything's rolling in the right direction because there's just something different about the energy this guy brings here. I actually think that may actually result in cleaning up some of these issues with Hurts because there seems to be tension between those two. And it almost feels to me that Hurts is trying to prove something to Sirianni. He doesn't think I can do X, Y, and Z, dating back to the McManus piece that dropped before the season began of, the offense, and he didn't trust me throwing over the middle of the field and this and that. And I almost wonder if there is such a bad taste in both of their mouths that they can't separate it anymore, and that might be playing a role in why we're getting this weird version of Jalen Hurts that's throwing a billion interceptions.
But this is the thing. Like, to me, I feel like that's just making excuses for Jalen. Like, maybe Jalen's turning the ball over because, I mean, he makes bad decisions because that's been the common thread, at least for me watching Jalen Hurts, is these turnovers. They're just bad decisions. They're just careless decisions with the football. Like fumbling that ball the other day, he's not getting hit. It's just a lack of ball security. I mean, you look at some of the interceptions. The interception against Green Bay, I know Boldy didn't think it was a bad decision. It was a bad decision. Like, you can't throw that ball. And to me, like, I think when we look at Jalen, we've got to hold him to the standard of he's got to make these decisions. He's got to protect the ball. We can't be blaming Nick every time that Jalen does something stupid. And he's to me the thing that concerns me more for this season. Like, I get Nick had a bad day on Sunday. There's no question about it. Again, the Atlanta game, I didn't think it was nearly as bad as it was made out to be. Sunday was he almost cost him the game, essentially. But you look at Jalen, man, these turnovers have become a huge issue, and I feel like it's something really didn't get talked about a lot last year.
So I can't run away from the fact that there are some real issues with Jalen turning over the football. But I guess the difference for me and why I put so much stock on what Nick Sirianni's presence means compared to Jalen Hurts and his interceptions is he still finds ways. He still does things. 3rd and long, and he takes the ball and he takes contact on and he still moves the chain somehow and he makes these crazy throws and he cleans it up mid-game. And sure, I would love for him to not put himself in those bad situations and they can just rock right from the rip without any turnovers whatsoever. But even with his flaws, he still does lock in and put the team on his back and, put the ball where it needs to be, change at the line of scrimmage to hit Dallas Goedert for the big play, which is a huge step in the right direction.
Somewhat of a lucky play there. That was a lucky play.
But that play
you have 3 Saints running into each other.
The play's designed to create that chaos in the middle of the field.
Yeah, I know.
But
a little bit of a lucky play. I'll take it, but a lucky play.
All jokes aside, though, creating it at the line of scrimmage is important. So I see signs of greatness within Jalen's flaws that need to be cleaned up. I don't know if I see signs of greatness from the head coach, even with the flaws.
I hear you, and it's fair enough. 215-592-9494 if you want to get in. We'll get to our side topic for tonight in a second, but first, let's check in with Francisco. That's always a dicey proposition.
Hey, guys.
But Francisco, do you feel better or worse about Nick and Jalen, and what do you think is the bigger issue moving forward?
So I definitely feel worse about both. I feel way worse about Jalen, though. Like, as
real
good
positive start to the show, by the way. All of us feel worse about the head coach and the quarterback.
Yeah, even after a win. I mean, remember, it was a 15-12 win. Like, I know the Saints had a good start, but 15-12. This offense should be putting up more points on the board than 15 points. I don't care if AJ wasn't there. I know Devontae went down, at a point in the game, but Jalen is getting paid $250 million to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. You cannot turn the ball over like that and at the end of the day have 15 points on the board, 21 points on the board against Atlanta. You have to be better than that. Turnovers are getting in the way of how good this offense is supposed to be. And it starts with Jalen, and Jalen is screwing up a year where we could be heading to the Super Bowl.
All right, can I counter real quick, TK?
Go ahead.
It would be more than 15 points if the guy on the sidelines understood what kicking field goals are.
I get that. Well, they should be scoring more than field goals. They should be scoring touchdowns.
You're
there should
right.
be 30-plus points on the board.
I don't disagree with that, but you do leave, and I won't be the guy that says if you put up 9, do the math, because the whole game changes after that. Play calls are different. You're playing from behind instead of playing from up. The whole thing changes on each perspective, so I won't say that. But the offense would be putting up more points if Nick Sirianni did reasonably kick some field goals.
Yeah, I get that. I just think that this team, they shouldn't be in those positions. They should be able to move the ball down the field much better than they have and not even be in those positions and get in the end zone. That's the way I say it.
Definitely. And if you want to get into 215-592-9494, and we could throw that question out there as well. What's the bigger concern moving forward, Nick Sirianni or Jalen Hurts? Is it Jalen's turnovers or Nick's decisions? I just look at it, and Jalen's got to clean this stuff up, man. And we can talk about Nick all we want. I mean, Nick is not going anywhere in the immediate.
No.
So, the decision-making needs to be better. And yeah, Nick has not had a good start to the season. If his job now is managing the game and making these decisions, hey, whether I agree with them or you agree with them or not, the bottom line is 2 games in a row, they haven't worked. Like the Atlanta game, it didn't work. The New Orleans game, it didn't work. So he's got to be better. But Jalen Hurts must protect the football. And he cannot continue to make these mistakes because you look at the end of that Atlanta game. That is just a terrible decision. And it's one that it didn't even hit me right away. I think because I was so shell-shocked that the defense gave up that drive that he threw the pick, and it's almost like, you didn't really expect them to win. But you look back at it, one timeout, you're 15, 20 yards out of Jake Elliott's field goal range. That is just a dreadful decision. And Jalen Hurts, ever since the Super Bowl, and in 2022, he was great. In 2022, his decision-making was tremendous. In the Super Bowl, he played, obviously, an unbelievable game. But this is now a large sample size of like 20, 21 games where his decision-making and his carelessness with the football has hurt this team. And there's one thing we know about winning in the NFL, you cannot win if your quarterback turns the ball over as frequently as Jalen is.
It's funny you bring up that Atlanta series because I felt the same way, and probably a lot of us in the area did. When you have the ball after the crazy touchdown where they went down in, 3 plays, they're already sniffing your end zone, which is absurd. I didn't realize how much time was actually left because I thought it was just desperate. All right, you threw it up there, you tried to salvage it, and it got turned over. But you're right, and I would like to go back and look at it even more in regards to maybe was the idea to take that shot from an offensive philosophy standpoint, because I am starting to learn that there are some flaws with Kellen Moore. Huge upgrade from last year, but why does Saquon Barkley not touch the ball as much as he should in the first half or in the first quarter? It takes him a whole quarter to establish such an unbelievable threat, and I don't know the answer to this. I'm speaking out loud, and maybe we'll learn as time goes on, but was that throw sort of why Kellen Moore has been moved on from in Dallas and moved on from with the Chargers? Is that's his message and that's his mentality, and Jalen Hurts is kind of following that? I don't know the answer.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how it moves forward, but there's no question about this. I mean, it's much easier to talk these things through at 2-1 than 1-2. Like, if the Eagles had lost that game, I mean, you think conversation's negative tonight now. I mean, if they had lost that game, it'd be a lot worse.
I got to say this, too. Nick Sirianni crying after the game's over. Not full-on tears.
Stop picking on Nick,
no,
man. Come on.
I'm just saying.
It's not right.
What type of look is it? If you're the head coach, you win a road game, you're now 2-1, and you're on, like, the edge, and you're so emotional that you're almost crying. To me, that screams he knows that this saved his job potentially.
He's a football guy.
No,
he's crying about winning a football game.
This is really...
Yeah, John Ritchie cries.
This isn't the NIU coach that beat Notre Dame, or what's it, Northern Iowa or Northern Illinois? Then I can get it. You're crying, you beat Notre Dame, it's Saturday football, college football. It's the pros, dude. You go into New Orleans, you think your team's so great, you won the game, you should be proud about it, you start crying, it starts to show red alarms to me that he knows the pressure's getting to him.
I think you're being a little too critical of the coach.
Well, there's a chance.
Hey.
There's a chance.
Yeah.
There's a chance.
Let's just ease off Nick a little bit. But what do you think's the bigger concern, Nick Sirianni or Jalen Hurts moving forward? 215 215-592-9494. I did want to throw a little side topic out there as well, because Brodes, earlier today I started watching a documentary on Netflix, Mr. McMahon.
Oh.
And it's based off Vince McMahon, obviously the big wrestling mogul who I don't even know what you call, I guess the owner of WWE, formerly WWF. And I've only watched a half hour of it so far, but it's a 6-part series. It looks tremendous. You're a wrestling guy, right? You're going to be watching this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, I will say, I did miss the Attitude Era 90s. I couldn't.
Oh, that's when I was a wrestling fan.
Well, I was 5
Stone
years
Cold
old.
Steve Austin.
You know what I'm saying? So I
man.
had to learn it a little bit as I went on and look back at it. But I am very interested in the whole situation. That guy's a nut job.
Who?
Vince
Vince
McMahon.
McMahon, yeah.
Yeah, he's a nut job.
Yeah, he has now been, canceled for a variety of very valid reasons, I'll say. But I've been watching that, and it does seem pretty interesting. And he seems like, well, not a good guy, an interesting person to do a documentary on. So I suggest people check it out. But I wanted to throw out this side topic tonight. Who's somebody that you'd like to see a documentary about? Do you have a suggestion to start us off?
I do, and it's only because it's consuming my whole life right now. I'm watching hour-long YouTube videos of conspiracy theories and learning about law and stuff in like attorneys that I would never pay attention to ever. And it's not because this guy's a good dude. This guy is a crazy person that deserves to be in jail forever. But, dude, this P. Diddy thing has me hooked. It is crazy.
He's going to go to jail, right?
This is
forever.
This is. I mean, you're talking.
I've been paying too much attention to it. I've been seeing things on.
This is more than just music. You're talking about politicians, the whole thing. This is like a secret organization of high-powered people with all sorts of trafficking and all. It is crazy stuff.
Wow.
And you're going to start to hear more names being called out. 50 Cent is apparently doing a documentary on it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you might be
Oh,
able
it's
to.
going to be good.
This is insane. I feel horrible for the victims involved. I mean, this is like actually a gut-wrenching, painful, you feel sorry for the people involved type stuff. But I can't believe this person's that sick that I'm intrigued to hear how this whole thing is even in place, if that makes sense. I'm not a sicko, I promise.
No, so you'd want to see a documentary about P. Diddy. Fran, do you have a suggestion off the top of your head? I can come back to you if you want.
I mean, yeah, come back to me. I was gonna say the Process Era, but that's like too corny.
That's
It's the corniest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah,
it
come
was so
back.
corny.
Come back. Shouldn't even want to.
I don't even know if I'll go back to you.
Come on.
You
man,
may
come
have
back.
just
I
lost
gotta go
your
back.
privileges.
Well, remember last show I did with you guys? I just butted in by accident.
Yeah,
That was
7
bad.
times.
I'll just do that.
That's
you guys,
fine.
You guys will be talking about something else.
Yeah, when you have something, you just feel free to jump on.
Okay, I'll just turn your
let
mics
us
off
know.
and I'll just turn mine on.
There you go. Perfect. 215-592-9494 if you want to get in. We'll get to the phones when we return. Also, Nick Sirianni spoke today about the fourth down situation and how he and Kellen Moore are managing play calling responsibilities. Gave an interesting is one way to put it answer. So we'll get to that as well coming up in the next segment. Tom Kelly and Brodes, we're with you till 3 tonight. Sports Radio 94 WIP.